What is up, guys? It has been a while, but we are so back. We are back better than ever. I hope you guys have been enjoying the podcast. I've really been enjoying making it, as well as my blog at the University of Florida. So if you haven't checked that out, you're missing out. But how's everybody doing? I mean, this is my first bug of the week since coming to the University of Florida, and boy, do I have lots of content for you guys. So, little life updates. I'm at the University of Florida studying entomology, and I'm on my second semester, so I've got a bunch of stuff from last semester to talk about. I also just got a tattoo, so that's pretty neat. I don't know if you guys can see it very well, but it is a tailless whip scorpion, an amplipigi. I already did a bug of the week about those, so go check that one out. They are my favorite arachnid, but my favorite arachnid butt. Lots of new stuff, to talk about, and new stuff in my organization. So I got an editor. Hi, Carly. You mean the early 2000s TV show? I am all over the place today. But yeah, I got an editor, and so she's going to help me out put these out more often. So thank you to Carly. Everyone say hi. And we're going to make some cool bug videos for you all. So today, I know it's not actually a bug. It's not like a specific bug. Today, I want to talk about bug brains. Bug brains are cool. I learned about them last semester in my Introduction to Entomology course, and it blew my mind. I realized that bug brains are not all that different from human brains. A lot of other things in insects, like the respiratory system, the circulatory system, are all very, very different than they are in mammals. But the nervous system in the brain is actually something that is more or less somewhat similar to us. So today I want to compare bug brains to human brains and some cool facts about them. So a big question that I get a lot is, do bugs have brains? And the answer is yes. They do have a brain-like structure. They do have a nerve cord and nerves like us humans do. And they even have a central and peripheral nervous system like humans do. But they vary in many different ways and complexities because they don't have, obviously, nearly as many neurons as we do. I'll talk about that in a minute. A lot more reactive things in the peripheral nervous system than processing anything. So that's part of how insects can react so quickly. Like if you ever try to swat a fly, that's how they react so quickly compared to us. So yeah, let's just jump right into it, starting with the brain. Yeah, so the insect brain is made up of 4 main parts. And this is a little different from the human brain or the mammal brain in that our brains is one big unit and it's got several lobes within it. With insects, it's really 4 separate parts within a somewhat brain-shaped organ. These 4 main parts are the optic lobes, the antennal lobes, the mushroom bodies, and the central complex. First off, let's go into the optic lobes. So these are those big bulbous sides of the insect brain, and their main use is to process visual information. So insects, actually, their visual systems, which I might make a whole separate video about, are very, very different than human visual system is. So the optic lobes are a paired system, and they take input directly in from the eye neurons, and insects have hundreds and sometimes thousands of these optic neurons, and they go directly into the antennal lobes for visual processing. And the optic lobes actually make up a very large surface area of the brain. So another common question that I get a lot is, how do insects see? So insects have something called compound eyes, which are these very complex matrix of these little sensory structures called ommatidium. Ommatidium are a elongated structure that is used for light sensory capabilities. So basically, to oversimplify it, light goes in the top of the ommatidium through the lens and then gets transferred through transduction via a electronic signal called an action potential and goes directly into the optic lobe. So whereas insects have compound eyes, we have corneal lenses in our eyes, and we get one wide picture. We have 2 eyeballs, our brain stitches it together so that we see one wide image. Insects are completely different, so they see it completely differently than we do. So there's a very common misconception that insects see many, many copies of things. And that is just not true. I don't know where that myth came from, but it's just not correct. They only see one image, just like we do. But think of it like pixels on a TV. Each ommatidium contributes one pixel to the final image, and the result looks more like a highly pixelated 8-bit stained glass kind of effect. So the result of this is a lower resolution than us humans would have, but it's very, very fast. So insects can react via visual cues much quicker than humans can, but they don't have as high resolution. Another big drawback to this system is that it's very energetically expensive to create these eyes. And so some insects that don't need very strong visual systems have actually lost these large eyes. So they have very, very small eyes or have completely lost them altogether. Some examples of this are some cave-dwelling insects that don't need to see, and also ants that live underground, things like that. Another drawback is that these eyes are limited directly by size. So the more ommatidium you have, the higher resolution your image will be, but the larger your eyes will be. So the quality of your image will be directly proportional to how large your eyes can be. Obviously, the larger the eyes get, the more heavy they become, the more expensive they become to create. So it won't just get infinitely big, but the most extreme example that I know of is called the big-headed fly. I mean, just look how stupid these things look like. That's ridiculous. Okay, so that's the optic lobes. Next, the antennal lobes. One of the most important aspects of insect sensory is olfactory, so the ability to smell. Insects communicate majority through pheromones and communicating with each other through chemicals that they put out. Us humans do have olfactory lobes, and we can smell things obviously, but like we don't use smells and pheromones nearly to the same level that insects do. So the antennae, as I'm sure many of you are familiar with, are a very important part of insect physiology, and they're not unique to insects. Many other arthropods have them, such as crustaceans, but the antennae in insects are very important to the way that they sense the world. That's what the antennal lobes are all about, is taking in the sensory information from the antennae and translating it into a signal that the insect then deciphers into a reaction. So the antennal lobes are paired, just like the optic lobes, one for each antennae. Next up are the mushroom bodies, and they're called the mushroom bodies because they look like mushrooms. So the mushroom bodies are also paired, but the tough thing about this is that we don't really know a whole lot about them, which I think is pretty exciting, but it is thought that they are used for learning and memory. So there's actually really good evidence that insects can learn and remember things, even though most insects don't live very long. So these lobes are often not very developed because the insect doesn't need to remember for a very long time, whereas with us humans, a large portion of our brains are for storing memories. So there's some really cool research that's been done on mainly cockroaches from what I am familiar with, where they have trained them to do certain, well, trained as best as you can train a bug, but sort of shown them recognition cues to trigger a certain behavior. There's also good evidence in this because there are some paper wasps that actually recognize members of their colonies not by pheromones, but mostly by their facial markings. Now, mind you, these paper wasp colonies are very small, not often reaching over 20 to 30 workers, but it seems like they can recognize each other and follow the social hierarchy within the colony based on the facial markings of each wasp. So between that and a lot of other studies, we've found that the mushroom bodies are most involved with learning and memory, which is really cool. Also, with highly eusocial insects like ants and honeybees specifically, we've seen that the mushroom bodies are actually quite large compared to other insects, and we think that's because they need to be able to learn and remember certain things about being within that colony over their lifespan. So yeah, really cool thing with the mushroom bodies. Unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of research about them, but I think they're pretty cool. Next up is the central complex, and it's this little tiny thing in the middle of this brain structure I was talking about. And the central complex basically ties these other three parts together and makes them communicate within each other. So the central complex is for higher order processing, recognition, coordination, calculating distances within space. So the central complex has actually mostly been studied in predatory insects, for example, the praying mantis. So there have been some studies around the central complex and its role in telling the insect where it is in space. As you can imagine, this is really important for praying mantises because they need to be able to tell how far away they are from a prey item, if that prey item is about to move, calculating, if the insect is moving at this speed, when do I need to strike to catch it? Those kinds of higher order processing is done in the central complex. All right, so now that we've got the brain out of the way, what about the nervous system? How does the nervous system of an insect compare to that of humans and other animals? Somewhat similar to our spinal cord, insects have something called the ventral nerve cord. The ventral nerve cord carries stimuli up and down from the brain all the way down the body of the insect. So, doesn't sound a whole lot different from the human nervous system, right? Well, insects have these things called ganglions. So ganglions are basically like miniature brains at certain parts of the body along the nerve cord. So the nerve cord carries stimuli up and down from the brain, but the ganglions are responsible for the quick reactions to certain stimuli. Okay, so firstly, starting at the top is the subesophageal ganglion. This one is responsible for a lot of the controlling of the mouth parts, so feeding, saliva, neck muscles, all of those things are controlled by the subesophageal ganglion. Next up is the prothoracic ganglion, and this is the ganglia that is responsible for controlling the legs and wings of the insect. So really important for locomotion. It's the reason why insects are able to react to harmful physical stimuli so quickly. So again, I mentioned you try to swat a fly. It's much faster to send that signal to this ganglion than sending it all the way up the nerve cord, up to the brain, and then all the way back. So this ganglion facilitates quick movements of the wings and the legs, especially if you think about in flight, right? So if an insect is flying, it needs to be able to react really quickly to make quick, fine adjustments in flight. That's what the thoracic ganglion is for. Lastly, there is the abdominal ganglion, which is important for the internal workings of the digestive system, the respiratory system, all those things that I think I might make a separate video about because those are all really cool too. That's what the abdominal ganglion is for. So yeah, bugs do have brains, and they're really cool, and they're really weird and different than ours. And there's been some very exciting studies recently that just came out. So late of last year, 2024, researchers created something called a connectome. A connectome is basically a map of a brain showing what the job of each neuron is and the points of synapse where they make within the body. So we've had a connectome for a worm, a nematode, called C. elegans for a very long time, and they only had a couple thousand neurons. But late last year, scientists, after about 10 years of work, finished the connectome for Drosophila, the fruit fly that everyone knows and loves. So yeah, they mapped out the entire brain of a fruit fly and can tell you what they've named every neuron, could tell you what it does, where it goes, and how important and how fast it is. All of those things were mapped out into the brain of a fruit fly, and it's super cool. So whereas the C. elegans was only a couple thousand neurons, the Drosophila one is 140,000 neurons. The Drosophila one is 140,000 neurons and more than 50 million synapses. So the way they did this is it was actually a global project. So scientists from all over the world worked for about 10 years to create the fruit fly connectome. It took a really, really long time. They took a fruit fly brain, they sliced it up into all these different slices, analyzed at each level what each neuron did. It took a really, really long time, and the problem is it was destructive, right? It destroyed the brain. So the end goal, obviously, we have C. elegans, the fruit fly, maybe some others, I'm not sure. Those are just the two that I know of, but those are the two that we have, and obviously the end goal would be to do it on mammals like, a mouse or eventually humans. If we knew what each neuron in the human body did, that would be insane for science. But again, the problem is there's an ethical problem in that the brain has to be destroyed. It's destructive. Also, to put it into perspective how much more complex the human brain is, the Drosophila brain has 160,000 neurons. Humans have an estimated 86 billion, with a B, neurons. So if the fruit fly brain took 10 years, the human brain is going to take a really long time, to say the least. So will we ever have the connectome for human? I don't know. Maybe the science will get there. Maybe we can do it way quicker, way better. Maybe the technology will evolve to a place where it'll be more feasible to do it for the human brain, but it's still really exciting. We understand so much more about the insect brain because of this Drosophila project. So if you're interested in checking out more about that, they actually made a website called Flywire, and I'll leave the link in the description if you guys are curious, but it's basically an online representation of the Drosophila connectome. You can look around, see where all the neurons are, how they connect. It's pretty cool. Yeah, so it's a 3D map of the Drosophila brain. Pretty cool stuff. With that, I hope you all enjoyed this. I am super excited to be back doing this every week with you guys. I've got lots of things to talk about. Some are not just bugs. Some are concepts within entomology. So with that, I hope you all enjoyed watching this episode. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment down below about something you learned today, and I will see you all next week. But until then, keep on bugging.